going on, Secondhand Talent family? It is Steiner here with another episode of Secondhand Talent here with Tim Dingus. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Now, folks, for those of you who are listening and not watching on YouTube, two things. One, I've got something to say, and the other thing is I broke my glasses earlier today, so I'm wearing my sunglasses. They're prescription for a reason. So that's happening. So a little bit about our friend here. Tim, juggling, Maggie, uh, juggling, magic, and comedy. The trio, stage and screen that just keeps giving. Tim Juggling Dingus has mastered the art of mixing all three with some help from friends. He's showing the world exactly what a juggler is capable of. Spoiler alert, there isn't much one can do once they've spent most of their time and energy learning to juggle, but hey, it's fun to watch. Tim is well prepared for both on the stage roles and behind the curtain. And Tim's show Tricks for Friends enter a world of wonder, merriment, and laughter where everyone walks away as a part of the experience where you are part of the show. Alternatively, if you're on the stage, allow Tim to support your needs as an artist. He's worked at a number of historic venues for multiple award-winning musical groups. It's time to light the lights, turn up the band. He is available to either entertain your audience as a magician or juggler, or enhance their entertainment experience as a live sound engineer. That is right, folks. He is no one-trick pony. Tim,
I forgot.
welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you so much for having me. I totally forgot. That's the blurb from my website, right?
I put a whole bunch of things together.
Okay,
I
good.
added a
That was
few
beautiful.
embellishments. Oh,
That
thank you
was
so
beautiful.
much. Well,
Well,
it's a
thank
real
you so much
pleasure.
for having me,
Oh,
of course.
I look, it's a real pleasure having you on the show. I think that introduction really didn't do justice to just how much you do in the industry, but it's a great
You've been
start.
listening to Shree Tucker again, haven't you?
Oh, she's been saying some things. Folks, at the time of this airing, we don't know if this episode is before or after Cherie's
Oh,
interview, but it is coming up, and you did already hear the announcement, so it was not a spoiler. Jinx, was that the right? No, it wasn't. Anyway, Tim, we have a typical first question we ask here on our podcast, and you and I we met recently. We
hmm
bonded quickly. I would love to hear your answer to this question.
hmm
The first time I reached out to you about being on the podcast and said, "Hey, I have a podcast called Secondhand Talent." What was your initial reaction to that term, to what that meant? What did that, you know, first instinct?
My first instinct was, cool, this guy's got a podcast. Gotta be honest, it was baseline response. At that time, I was doing 15, 20 other things. And I actually had more time to think about it today. I should have been working, but I wasn't. Instead, I was thinking about this question. Um,
Really? Oh, wow.
yeah.
I'm honored. Oh.
Um, so yeah, in thinking of the question, secondhand talent, and I came back to did you ever watch the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer claymation sort of stop motion movies as
Oh,
a kid?
sure. Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
Island of
Yeah.
Misfit Toys?
Oh, yeah. Yes, 100% so.
This is exactly what I thought of. The secondhand talent is the Island of Misfit Toys, but we are together better than the sum of our parts. That's that's where I came to. That's what I came to.
Love it. I mean, it's so fascinating to me how as this show has grown, and it's so hard for me to believe that we're in our fourth season right now. It gets so much harder to ask this question.
I'm going to interrupt real quick.
Okay.
Fourth season, friends. A feat so impressive, I'm forced to mention it myself. The fourth season of this show. My goodness. How do you keep up? I mean, you were telling me before we started recording how many hats you wear, not just figure or literally,
Uh-huh.
because I know you wear a different hat each show. I haven't been keeping track, but have you worn two of the same hats one right after the other?
You know, um,
or did you give up on that? Because you're
Why
like,
the
no, I got all these other hats I got to wear.
great question. Wasn't expecting to get interviewed.
I
It's
told you I came prepared, darn it.
so, I have done my absolute best.
Okay.
However, after our 50th episode aired, and once I was kind of starting to formulate the idea that, you know, we'd be finishing season three with 60 episodes, with the
Mm-hmm.
goal of 75 at the end of season four,
Mm-hmm.
it just at that point becomes an impossibility, even for somebody with such a haberdashery collection as myself.
The, the,
Uh,
storage costs money, folks. I mean, that's really what it is.
I
How
have
many hats can
strip.
one
I
man own?
I just have strips on the door with hooks on them that Steiner
There you
got me,
go.
and she was like, "Put your hats there." Like, oh, but she said it a
Yes,
lot
dear.
nicer than that. Yeah. Listen, it's a lot of juggling. It's a lot of multiple balls in the air.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to keep track of, so many hats and so many shirts, and there's a limited
Right.
number of each. And I am incredibly grateful and blessed that I have the opportunity to re-wear some hats and re-wear some shirts. I see that as more of initially I kind of made it a challenge for myself, but I saw it now for me it's more of a badge of honor that like, yeah, I've worn this one before. Like that's cool. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's a sign of growth.
At this point, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You got to keep going, doing however you can. Casey Neistat had to stop making daily vlogs after 800 some odd. Because at some point, he's just like, look, something's got to give. It's either going to be me and a divorce, or it's going to be this daily vlog. And no, I get it, man. Taking one less thing off the list of things that need to happen in order for a new show to come out, especially if you're, let's see here, you're writing the intros, you're editing these so that people can listen to them. You're posting them on, let's see here, I found it on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. Are you also on Tidal? Didn't check there.
We're not on title, but we're actually ranked in the top 50 Chicago podcasts on Good Pods.
Excellent.
And in a few other categories on Good Pods as well. So please listen on Good Pods. But we're on about 25 different audio platforms, and you can also stream the episodes directly on secondhandtalent.com and the videos are on the YouTube channel.
So you're also a webmaster at this point too, because you have to.
Well, I I certainly wouldn't consider myself a master, but I would say that if we took a screenshot of how the website looked when I had first developed it to
Mhm.
now, and if you care, any new listeners or recent listeners or old listeners, if you go back and kind of listen to the episodes in progression from a time perspective, point A to point B, beginning to end, seasons 1 to 4, you'll hear and see the difference. No,
Mhm.
it's not perfect. Never claiming it is or was, but it's certainly been a visible learning curve. It's
It
not
certainly
it's
has.
it's not a secret that adjustments have been made, as we've gone along.
Mhm.
As I said before, a lot to juggle. I'm trying to get back to interviewing you.
Sorry, and I do want to apologize. I tried to mention it earlier, but if you see me keep looking to my right, or your viewers keep seeing me look to my right, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's not because I have some really good adult filmography on my to my right here. That's where my laptop is.
And
It's I'm
to our
checking in.
just a note to our listeners, if you're not looking to the right, that's good. If you
The
don't see,
folks,
if you don't, if you're listening and you don't see him looking to the right, that's a good thing. Like,
that's a good sign.
yeah,
It's
you're doing well. You got
radios
nothing to
and
worry.
radios and podcasts are two places where juggling doesn't work. Almost. There's one trick you can do. You
Mm.
can only do it once though. It's juggling a bowling ball, an egg, and a cactus. And I bet you can understand why it only works once, because I'll never do that again. Not since the accident. But let's get away from that. I suspect you have some other questions you'd prefer to ask.
I do indeed, although that was quite fun. I did continue to reference back to juggling
Hmm.
because to me, you know, yeah, I think juggling is cool, but utilizing the skill to kind of pay it forward to a
Hmm.
younger audience, the big theme of this show has been, um, you know, one of the messages that I'd like to convey with the platform is that the love of the art, the craft, whatever craft it may be, did not
Hmm.
start with us, nor should it end with us. And it's a
Hmm.
vehicle to pass that love down and to, develop programming that, as we mentioned in the intro, involves the audience.
Hmm.
That is really, the cooler aspect to me. And I guess before we get to the rear juggling, and of course, there's the live sound to talk about.
Hmm.
Two questions. First, which came first? When did
But
were you a music fan, or did you start picking up, things to
oh,
juggle? Yeah.
um,
When did you
there.
start either of those?
So I actually my father would he has a degree in bass trombone performance. So I did. Yeah, a new phrase has entered the chat. Yes, my
Yes,
father
sir.
has a degree in bass trombone performance. So um, then that's how he and my mother met. Was he was playing? Are you familiar with Drum Corps International at all? DCI,
I
Professional
actually
Marching
am.
Band.
I actually am. Yeah. I have a, I
So
have I have a friend who was in marching band in college, so a couple
so
friends actually, and they were
he
drummers. So
he met my mom as he came off a world championship. He was a part of the Blue Devils back in the 80s. And he met my mom coming off of that, and he was at a university. I can't remember if it's in Pennsylvania or in Nevada. I want to say it's in Nevada. Don't quote me on this because well, it's not like they might listen to this and I might get an angry text. But I
I,
want to
I
say it
feel
was
like they're
Nevada.
not. I feel like those aren't close. Like
Well,
I
there's
I
reasons.
like if it was like Pennsylvania or Virginia, I'd be like, okay, but like or like Nevada or Arizona. But
There
like
are there are reasons, and it's because they both went to college in both places. They went to college at the University of Nevada, Reno, and my mom went to college at Penn State. And
okay.
Dad worked up there, so I don't know. I don't remember which of the two they met at. I have an invisible map in front of me. I'm not sure if you can tell. I
I
know
can
they didn't meet
tell.
somewhere in the middle.
I can
Um,
tell. Our listeners can tell too. They don't need to see you
see if you.
gesturing to know that it's an invisible man.
That said, so they met and very quickly fell in love and had me while they were both still playing music. And so
Hmm.
I came out to the sound, or some of my earliest memories are of me coming into the living room with my dad hunched over a tuba playing long tones, which
Yeah.
are the most annoying things on the planet. Oh my God. It's a Saturday morning. I just want to get up, grab a bowl of Cheerios or whatever and watch cartoons on the TV. But nope, Dad's sitting there with his tuba or his trombone or whatever, playing long tones. Jeez. And so I started very early with music, just in the household. And then I, at one point, I had this brilliant idea that I was going to become the next Buddy Rich or the next Gene Krupa or something along those lines. Drummer. Spoiler, I'm no good at drumming. I can keep time, but my left hand is kind of lackluster, let's say. And then, so I switched to low brass. And throughout my musical career in public school, That's where I stayed, is in the low brass section. So tenor, trombone, bass trombone, and tuba and euphonium was where I sat.
It's interesting
Uh-huh.
because the week before this, so this is episode 2 of the season, and
Hmm.
last week's episode was with Ron Bruner Sr.,
Hmm.
drummer for Gladys Knight, Temptations, Supremes,
Hmm.
among many others. His 3 sons, wonderful musicians, award-winning musicians in their own rights.
Hmm.
Um, so fun that you bring up drumming, and then, you know, fun that you bring up horns because this is a musical hill that I will die on. Any song is better with horns.
Not
I,
true.
that's fair, but I have one more thing to say.
Okay.
It's fortuitous timing at the time of this taping. It's right around Rosh Hashanah, and
Hmm.
we blow the shofar, and
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
have and it's a horn. I have that yeah. I can relate to that sound being like even hearing it once a year. It's like there's a reason we do this once a year. It's enough to remind us. It's enough to remind us of our guilt.
Oh,
We
it's
got this. Yeah.
reminds me of an old joke, and this is one of those jokes that you can change to fit any instrument. What's the definition of a gentleman? It's somebody that knows how to play a banjo and doesn't. It, what's the definition of a gentleman? It's someone who knows how to play long tones and doesn't. Oh man.
How do
But
you
I will
save a
say,
drowning bass player?
throw him his amp.
Yeah.
Um, I will say though, my progression in music, at towards the end of my of public school, I was primarily playing bass trombone because I figured I could play all the parts, and I got
And
tired of lugging all the stuff around. And that's a theme that's going to come up again, I promise.
and were you playing in band? What
Hmm.
and were you playing outside of school as well?
So because of my dad's work, he was a professional gigging musician.
Mm.
And in Reno, Nevada, he played in the casinos around there with jazz big bands. So he backed up like Robert Goulet and stuff like that. Oh yeah, no, yeah. Folks, if you're not watching on YouTube, you should be to see that reaction. Just come back to this section of the podcast to see it.
I'll take my glasses off. Holy. I did a full
Yeah, yeah.
like that was that like if you're gonna pull out one name, what a name. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And Dad never tires to tell me of what Robert Goulet to him said to him. He said, "Hey kid, get your stuff out of my way. I got to go to the bathroom."
Sage
uh,
advice.
exactly. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll just get that moved right along here.
Yeah.
Um, so I was playing in public school band, so sit down concert band and in jazz band and marching band to an extent. But I was also subbing in local big bands. And when I moved to Lawrence, Kansas, in 2005, I kept doing that. So I'd sit in with local big bands and started playing with them, which is also why I switched from playing uh, tenor trombone, bass trombone, tuba, and euphonium to just bass trombone because part of it was I realized if I'm going to be a gigging musician, I'm going to have a car that a gigging musician would have. Something like, I don't know, a Toyota
You have to be
Corolla.
practical about the space that it takes to put that kind of gear in. I mean, we're talking about, I
Exactly.
mean, it's not just the instrument itself, it's the casing is to protect
Exactly.
it is massive. And folks who haven't, who don't play horns or who haven't toured with the band, space is limited and vital.
I
And
dare anybody to try to fit a bass rig, so bass guitar, and a half stack in the back of a 2012 Chevy Spark. I can f- I've done something similar, and I'm happy to
I
send a picture to you so
I
you can
can
see
think of
it.
one or two people that might be able to, but god damn, that's a tall order right there.
In 2011, I was living in
Well, real
Hawaii.
quick,
Yes, sir.
before 2011, you
Hmm.
mentioned 2005.
Yes.
How old were you at that point when you moved to Lawrence?
Oh, crud. That'd be a really good question to ask because that's something I should know.
No, it's cool.
14, 15?
I'm not a numbers guy either. Um,
14 or
so
15.
so you went from playing in high school and subbing to playing in high school and subbing.
Yeah, Lawrence is weird. Lawrence, Kansas was weird at the time. So I finished what most of the country would call middle school in Reno the year prior.
Hmm.
So I finished eighth grade and fully expected to move up into high school. And I moved to Northeast Kansas in Lawrence and in 2005. And whoop, I'm back in junior high for ninth grade. What the heck? Come to find out, at the time they did K through six as the elementary schools, and then
And they
7, 8, 9 was junior high, and then 10 through 12. And they phased out of that after my class left junior high. My class was the last
I was
freshman class.
I was gonna say, like, I went in high school around that time, and I can't recall about I can't recall that sort of policy. That's
It had to do with
really interesting.
it had to do with population control at both the junior high level and the senior high level.
Mm.
Lawrence isn't a huge town, so there are two high schools. Count them, two prices, two schools in one. Two high schools is all
But
they get.
did that did that work to your advantage though? Being a
Uh,
musician who that would then hone down to a specialty?
no, not necessarily, because while I was decently good as a musician, and I could sight at the time I could sight read pretty well. I was also pretty lazy.
Mm.
I mean, still am to a certain extent. Why do things the hard way when you can do them the easy way?
Hey man, I'm in a glass house here. I'm not, you know.
Exactly. But I will say the one thing I learned from playing music that transferred to my career in juggling and then future my career in sound engineering is how to listen and how to practice. And I consider those two things to be intertwined, one and the same, how to listen and how to practice. Um,
Absolutely.
mhm.
I mean, I listening, everybody hears. It takes practice to listen. Listening is an active process in order to truly, you know, understand something, you have to
Mhm.
really listen to it.
Exactly.
It's a verb, not a noun. And uh, hearing is just something we call the sensation,
Hmm.
but truly listening is something that um unfortunately I feel like is rarely taught. It's almost like close reading or you know uh, really dissecting a passage or something like that. It's a attention to detail
Well, it's not
that's
just an attention to detail thing, it's also an attention span thing. Do you remember
mm,
do you remember the quote that you told me before we started recording?
yeah, I believe and I'm paraphrasing, but I do believe that since the time of Henry David Thoreau, who we were
Hmm.
talking about, to now, um, the generation right under us, their attention span for absolute silence has decreased from that time to now from 9 seconds to four,
Four.
meaning
It dropped 5 seconds. Yeah.
drop 5 full seconds for the ability to cope with absolute silence.
Hmm.
The maximum is typical maximum. Obviously, there's a range,
Hmm.
but it's something that needs to be practiced, just like anything. It's a muscle that is flexed, and like practicing relaxation. Like, yeah, you do need to practice being in a relaxed and silent place. It's not intuitive.
And I bring this up because I feel like the ability to sit and be comfortable in the silence is also directly linked to the ability to sit and critically listen. You not only have to
Mm.
listen for all of the noise that is occurring, for the wiggly air, but you also have to listen for the not wiggly air, the silence, because that's just as important as the noise that you're hearing.
It's like what I say about Jerry Garcia. He's more about the notes he didn't play
Mm-hmm.
is the most beautiful part of his guitar playing. So we were connected by our mutual friend, the wonderful, multi-talented Cherie Tucker, who's also a guest this season.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering how you were connected to Cherie.
So I first came into Shri of Shady Business Productions.
Shady
Oh man,
business all day.
it's on the stickers on my Go case. Um, through I want to say the local to Northeast Kansas bluegrass scene. One of my specialties as a live sound engineer is bluegrass, and so I want to say it was this. I'm gonna have to think on this a second here.
Yeah, no, no
Unfit. I
worries.
want to say it was the Unfit Wives. It was at an Unfit Wives show that I was working at the local venue, Lucia Beer Garden and Grill. Um, but I don't know that that's right. I'm going to say that that's where I first remember actually meeting her. And we've worked together a bunch now. 2 years ago at the Halfway to Everywhere Festival, so not this most recent one, but the one before that in Emporia, Kansas, hosted by the Kansas Free for Arts folks. So Hank Osterhout and all those cats, and Corey Anderson at the time. The She actually contacted Hank and said, "Look, I'd like to, I want to sponsor a stage, and I want Dingus running it." So she and I have been working together a lot. Anytime a show comes through Northeast Kansas and she wants to make sure her band is taken care of, she'll give me a call and I'll do my best to make sure they're. If I can't fix the problem, I'll at least explain what's going on so the band doesn't think it's their fault, because
Well,
that's something I hate.
it's something to be reckoned with. One of the great things that I hope to accomplish with this show, and one of the things I've said from the start is the goal is not only to highlight the guests who we have on the show,
Hmm.
the spaces that they occupy,
Hmm.
because, you're that dude where you are. And in
Hmm.
every region, there's that person. And it's critical to know who's in what area to run a show properly. And I really hope that, I've always hoped that one of the outcomes of this show would be that people would take a keener interest into, having that more quality sound. I know, on a project I worked on this past summer at the time of this taping, if I had to pick a sound guy to run any room or any show in Chicago, Marshall Towski, shout out to you, sir.
Hmm.
You're my man. I mean, I've heard him make the worst shaped room sound incredible. And you know, it's really something that should be, in my opinion, a more regular thing
Yeah.
that we're promoting each other, that we're referring each other. I mean, if anybody asks me who's
Hmm.
the best sound person in the greater Chicagoland area, they
Hmm.
I'm gonna say call Marshall. If anybody asks me about, film, I'm gonna say shout out to my buddy Michael Silverman at Great Eye Films. If anybody asks me about event production, shout out Jesse Kreiderman at Inside Straight Productions. Like,
Hmm.
It's so integral and it's so important that we promote each other and that we continue to involve each other in what we do.
And in certain situations, we are also each other's support network. So I am now based in the Kansas City area, but I cut my teeth doing live sound in Lawrence, and all of the engineers in Lawrence know each other, all of them. So if you're working the bar scene, you likely don't work at one of the venues, you work at all of them, or are able to work at all of them.
Is this
Um,
kind of getting back to what you had mentioned earlier about being in such a condensed area, maybe not working towards your advantage?
well, no. So I mean, there's not enough work to be able to make that your daily job.
Gotcha.
But the point I was trying to make was we are also each other's support system. Not only do we want to shout each other out, like I am no good at working punk shows. I don't like working punk shows. It's all too damn loud. Turn down your guitar amp. I know where the circuits breaker are, fucker. I will unplug you. Don't test me. But I know who is good at that. You want to talk to Renee Huey over at Replay, or you want to talk to Chris Maddox about booking a show over at Bottleneck, or you want Nathan Gammon running your show, or if you've got a tour and you need somebody covering the Midwest leg, call Nate Gammon. Or if you need an in-ear rig sorted, you're having issues with your in-ear monitors, you need to get that sorted. Well, call Corey Anderson out of Emporia. The Northeast Kansas, and I'm sure that this is true all over the country. The Northeast Kansas engineers, we all know each other. Even if it's just, oh yeah, I know who that guy is, but we all know and know of each other, and so we're always able to push work each other's way. Because, like I said, I'm no good at punk, and somebody else might not be good at bluegrass, but we can switch, and you'll have just as good a time, if not better, because you have the right person for the job. That was the point I was trying to make.
No, I think you made it quite well, actually. And I kind of like to dig a little bit further behind that into
Hmm.
kind of what got you into sound engineering in the first place. I mean,
Hmm.
juggling to working, front of house doesn't really to me seem like
It's a
well,
lateral move.
apples to apples. Oh, it's definitely lateral, but there's a vastness between points A and point B that we have to reckon with here.
So I can actually condense that down. It doesn't make sense if you're looking at it like at face value. So he was juggling primarily, and then he became a sound engineer. What happened between this? So I learned how to juggle in 2005, and I kept juggling, and had a whole lot of fun. And then 2011, I had this bright idea in my head. I'm going to move to Hawaii because I had just seen the Lawrence Busker Festival. So street performers from all around the country come out to Lawrence once a year and street perform for 3 days for free for anybody and everybody to watch. The only catch is if you like the show, at the end, they're going to hold out their hat. And if you like it, put a tip in the hat. That's it. That's how the performers get paid. And I did some research and I found that some of the funniest people I have ever heard were street performers first. Eddie Izzard, for instance, who I just now realized may have changed their name. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. Forgive me. But Eddie Izzard was a street performer in London for a number of years. Let's see here. Steve Martin street performed. Robin Williams was a mime in New York. And there's a whole list of other street performers who made the jump from street performing to big time entertainment. And that's where I thought I was headed. So I thought, well, where am I going to move where I can really learn how to do that? Well, I like Hawaii and the weather's nice there year round, so let's move out to Hawaii. And so by day, I was cooking in a restaurant so I could make sure I'd ate. And then at night, I'd street perform, and I'd either do my magic and juggling stuff, my at that time really terrible juggling show, or I would play bass in a street performing band. Um, we fit drum kit, bass amp, bass, um, and steel pan, steel drum, and another amp, and three guys in the back of a convertible Beetle. And that's how we got the,
Oh,
oh God, it was really practicing the art of the folded human gami, human origami. Really got my yoga
it's all
poses in.
Oregon Ami right
Oh
there.
my
Like
God.
it's like you're just like, hey, kidney, I need you to do two folds. Like you're like
So we
liver, your turn. Sorry. All right,
exact.
there you go.
So that's actually that street performing things where I really started getting interested in how does this all work? Because I saw that like we weren't miking up the drums out on the street, but we were miking up the steel pan. Well, how does that work? What are we using? What's this mic? What's this do? What are all these component bits? Okay, cool. And I kept that in my head for later on. And then when I turned 21, I was hanging out with a bunch of nerds at the local coffee shop, Henry's, in Lawrence on 8th Street. Henry's is no longer there. I mean, the bar is upstairs, but the coffee shop's gone now. And I was hanging out with a guy named Jay Phoenix, and he was trying to explain to me what he does. And one day he described it as, you know how when you go to a show and you see that guy that's frowning at what looks like the controls to a spaceship? Yeah, well, that's a sound engineer. Okay, but why is he frowning? Well, I mean, because why not? That's what a sound engineer does, right? Seriously, he's not frowning. He's listening. It's usually a he. Thankfully, we're moving away from that now. Love to see more women in the space.
He's concentrating, and also a
Hmm.
theme that we touch on later in the season with Caroline Herbster, and that we touched on last season with Susanna Millman
Hmm.
about lessening that distinction. It's, absolutely something that we should be aiming towards. But you were saying, I'm sorry.
It's okay. And so he took me with him to an open mic that he was doing sound for, and he and his lovely wife named Deanie taught me the basics. This is an analog desk. This is what the channel strip looks like. Here's what gain knob does. Here's what all the things do. Okay, now repeat that 32 times, and that's your desk, right? It's the same thing repeated 32 times. Oh, okay, cool. And so I'd start, and that's how I started. And then one day, and this was at the Jazz House in Lawrence, and one day I showed up, and the owner was standing there, and he goes, "You're the guy that was learning how to do sound, right?" I said, yeah. Cool. You're the sound guy now. I said, what? Sound guys aren't known necessarily for their even temperament.
So they're frowning because they're focusing, but they're also frowning.
Yeah. Especially I don't want to cast there
Cast
were some,
aspersions. Go ahead. You can cast away. Like as I always say, as it says, Proverbs 7:15. Cast thine eyes upon my field of fucks and see that it lies barren.
peace, granola. And so there were some questionable things happening at the venue. Ownership
Mm.
was making some odd choices, and there were things that needed to be taken care of so that the venue can maintain being a decent venue that bands want to play at, so that the bar makes money and so on and so forth. And we all know these venues.
And
It's
just real quick shout out, sorry if I may,
yeah, go ahead.
to last season's guest, Blake Boris Shader, who runs the Get Down in Portland. Folks, if you want to see an example of a venue that's run right, check out that
Yeah.
interview because there I can think of one that comes to the tip of my tongue, although I'm reticent to say it out
See,
loud.
that's exactly my thought. That was what was going through my head. It's like, do I actually say this out loud? Because, this could get, I mean, I'm already banned for life from working at this venue.
You
So,
you know what? It's closed. Fuck it. The Congress Theater in Chicago was an ugly place in many, many, many ways. And
hmm
it did not close soon enough. And, I was young and
hmm
saw the unsavory behavior, but didn't understand the impact and the depth and breadth of
yeah,
it. And, looking back, obviously I wish I knew then what I wish that I know now what I wish I
had the
know
presence of mind to run out the doors as fast as you could.
or to say something when I saw
Yep.
something, and not knowing better and seeing that other people weren't and following that lead. And
hmm
it's nice to see that these things are slowly changing. It's you don't need to name any particular venue, but
No,
we
I
all
already did.
know.
It's Jazz House. It's still open to this day, and I anytime a band comes through, there's an artist based out of Las Vegas. That one guy. Have you heard of him by chance?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, sure, sure,
Okay,
sure,
good.
sure.
That one guy, first off, he is one of the best close-up magicians I've ever met.
He is super. I've seen his act once. He's
And I've
incredible.
I've had the pleasure of working with him a number of times in a couple of different venues. And he actually, before I made the switch from just doing the juggling and magic thing to becoming a sound engineer, he gave me some advice because I saw him at Henry's one day. And I walked up and I go, "Excuse me, are you that one guy?" Yes. What the hell are you doing here? Cool. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? I like your music. And he gave me some advice on how to perform a piece I was working on. But he was set to perform at Jazz House. And I saw that and I sent him a message because he and we're friendly. We're acquaintances now. And so I shot him a text. I'm like, what the hell are you doing playing this venue, dude? And he goes, I didn't book it. Okay. Um, Venues like this give live music a bad name, in my opinion, because you walk in the establishment, the culture in the space. It's one thing if the venue sounds bad, right? You can do a lot in a bad sounding space if the vibe is right. But if the vibe's wrong and you're constantly having to deal with schmucks, um, and the whole bit, then what's the point? And this is, I unfortunately worked at that space for a couple of years, and then I left, and I found out after the fact that I was banned from ever working there again, which in my opinion is fine. Good riddance to bad rubbish.
There you
Um,
go.
mhm. And then in the meantime, while I was doing that, I also started working at the Lawrence Busker Festival as one of their stage managers. So I became a sound engineer for the very thing that started my career path with regards to street performance, magic and
Huh.
juggling. And
So
I
that,
still work that event every year.
oh, well, what a roundabout there. I mean, so
I
so
know.
you went. I mean, we talk about I talk about in class a lot this about the story circle,
hmm
and that's a perfect example of it where it's a confluence of events that lead you to a collaboration of formative aspects
hmm
of your life.
And so that indeed, that the Lawrence Busker Festival teaches me more every year, both
Mm.
as a performer and as a showrunner or as somebody in production. A good majority of my time at the Lawrence Busker Festival is sat. I'm sitting down and I'm listening. On occasion, I have to get up to a mic and say, The 2024 Lawrence Busker Festival would like to thank you for coming and thank some of our sponsors, including but not limited to, and run ad copy by the audience. Um, I'm taking this though a step farther. At the 2024 Kansas City Juggling Festival, I am providing live sound assistance. So I'm bringing a PA with me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And at our public show, I am the MC. This has happened a couple of times because I do both juggling and magic and
Oh,
MC work, and I'm a live sound engineer. On occasion, a gig will crop up where I have to do both MC and live sound. And let me tell you, doing live sound while also being an MC is kind of there are two halves of my brain. One half is have to entertain the audience. The other half is have to make sure has to make sure the band sounds good. So getting those two to meet up is very difficult, but it does introduce some fairly entertaining points. Have you ever walked an audience through what sound check is supposed to sound like and what it is that you're doing? Because I have. I will say for me that that type of experience is always odd because I'm already wearing a mic, so I've got a wireless mic and whatnot, and usually I just make sure it's in the monitors. But I realized while I'm doing this, the audience is sitting behind me and they're just kind of, sitting there picking their nose, whatever, waiting. And so finally, I did this year at a small festival called Bluegrass at the Lake in Marion, Kansas. For those of you who have never been to Marion, Kansas, go to Emporia and then keep driving. And then when you reach the end of the road, go about 15 miles farther. It's right there at the
just keep
corner.
just
It's right there at the corner of no and where.
you'll see a tree that looks kind of funny. If you see that, you've gone too
You've
far.
gone too far.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, they've got a highway now. It had four cars on it, but they were just parked on the side, and they had those tickets on the windows saying that they've been there for 48 hours or longer. Um, but I'm doing the sound check and I realize these people are behind me. So finally, I just bring my mic up in the mains and I'm like, what was it? I said, Bluegrass at the Lake would like to thank our sponsor, whoever the sponsor is, for sponsoring this sound check. Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to witness a Bluegrass at the Lake first, a live sound check performed for you by your MC and band. All right, can I get that kick drum, please? No, just the kick
Ah,
drum. My good, no, kick drum, not bass guitar. Guys, this is sound check. This isn't rehearsal. Okay, snare, cool. Now the bass guitar. Sweet. Okay, before I put that in the mains, did you want to consider tuning, perhaps?
it's one of my favorite jokes with bands I've worked with is that every song they open with is a cover of the Grateful Dead's tuning.
One of my favorite things is when as an MC when I'm doing MC work is if there's some silence, I take a page right out of the Robin Williams playbook.
Yeah.
That last 30 seconds you heard was the Marcel
Yeah.
Marceau's newest hit single, "Walking in the Wind." Coming up next, it's whatever's supposed to be up next. So
Right. You
I
fill the space. You understand when the moment is there and you utilize it to,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So bringing those two things together, when I'm doing live sound work, I do put on a bit of it's a slightly different bedside manner because I want the band to be comfy on stage and I want them to be happy. I have a theory. Your music's going to sound better. You're going to play better music if you're smiling. So
Say that louder for the people in the back.
you're going to play better music if you're smiling.
Amen.
Oh my goodness. I don't know how many shows I've walked into and the band is just they're chugging away and it's like watching somebody try to chop wood with a dull axe and it's not working. And you look at the sound guy and they've
They're
can I
just like,
curse?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
and
about to
they
say they're
fucked
just like,
off.
I don't fucking know.
Yeah, yeah,
You do
the sound
something
guys,
about it.
the sound guys fucked off. They're off smoking in the alleyway, and you're like, well, no wonder the band's ticked. And it sounds like crap, and the music itself doesn't sound very good. But you know the band is good. And
Yeah,
then you put them up against the next night, and they've got an engineer who's engaging and who's actually wants to be there, and you've got good vibes all around and everything. Oh my! All of a sudden, it's a party. You know it. My theory is you play better music when you're smiling. And so I bring my some of my street performer the things I learned while street performing and I apply it to engaging with the band because in 7 out of 10 times I'm not going to run into that band again. Or at least that was the case a couple of years ago. These days, I don't work at one specific venue. You got to request me these days because I stepped away from doing live sound full time for mental health reasons. So nowadays, bands request me because they know which asshole they're going to get. It's going to be me.
right, right.
So,
Well,
uh,
know thyself. I mean, it's
mhm,
something that we've also touched on in this podcast
mhm,
a number of times is the toll that being in the industry takes on us, you know, whether that manifests through mental health issues or
mhm,
substance abuse or
mhm,
any manner of ways. You know, it really, you know, at the end of the day, not just the band, but the secondhand talent, everybody
mhm,
involved in the live music process. We're all humans too. And everybody has their, you know, everybody has their limit, everybody has their line and everybody has their own stuff going on. You know,
right.
we don't know what's happening in other people's lives. And yeah, it's a band on stage, but it's comprised of individuals. And something you mentioned in the very beginning, you know,
Mhm,
in the response to the initial question about how, you know, the sum, you know, the sum of the whole being greater than the parts, you know,
mhm,
takes to I agree, but it's almost like, and I've used this metaphor on the show before, it's like Lego, where
mhm.
that's true, but you can't be missing a single brick. Otherwise, it's going to be askew. And that's the
Yeah.
importance of finding that balance and understanding yourself and recognizing, hey, maybe I need to stay away from this because at the end of the day, you know, there's only one you and you have to take care of yourself and
Mhm,
often gets too often gets overlooked for, you know, for success. And it's, well, you know, you got to be successful at your craft, but you also need to be able to, you know, live to to work your craft.
in my head for some reason I'm thinking of Chicago-based artist Darren Keane, Problems Music. And I'm trying to imagine him walking around without eyebrows. You know there's something wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on what. The reason I bring that up is he had mentioned. Let's see here. Actually, he was to me. He played a show in Lawrence 2 or 3 years back now, and I had the pleasure of mixing him there. That's where I met him. By the way, Problems Music. Go check that shit out. Oh my gosh.
You heard
Um,
the man. Go check it out.
oh, it's so good. He had mentioned to me that he had to make some big changes in his life because he was going to like it wasn't going well. And so as a part of the way he was touring, he changed the way he was eating. He did not drink anymore. He didn't do anything didn't do any extra substances because for him it was more important to be able to make music than it was to enjoy those extracurriculars. And if he had kept enjoying the extracurriculars, he wouldn't have been able to enjoy music. For me, I would not be able to enjoy anything had I kept working 7 days a week.
And you know,
And yeah.
there's nothing, and again, nothing wrong with necessarily with working 7 days a week. Nothing wrong with extracurriculars, allegedly.
No,
But
no, nothing at all. But it
but everything in moderation, including moderation.
exactly, and for me, it was. I mean, I wasn't doing it in moderation. I wasn't working in moderation.
And
Typically on a
that's yeah.
Friday, I would get up at 6 a.m., go to work from 7 to 3:30, and then drive immediately to my gig and work my gig for however many hours, then get back home at 3 o'clock in the morning. You do that a bunch. It's not very good for you.
Yeah.
Another guy who quit live sound entirely because he legitimately turned green because he just wasn't sleeping right. He wasn't eating right. He's much happier now, thankfully.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, like, look, it's you know, think about from the time of this taping, show I produced earlier this year in February. You know, was really thinking a lot about the show and how, people who are showing up to doors at 7:30 don't
mhm.
know that I am in my car at 9 a.m. on my way to Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Right.
And another goal I hope of this show is to, foster that understanding in folks that like it's a full-time job getting a show produced by a
Hmm.
lot of people. And just like a Lego set, as I mentioned before, every one of those people is essential. It's
If one of
not
them's not there, it's entirely possible that you can't build the Lego set.
mm, yeah, there's I think of a show I saw close to 15 years ago. I saw Phoenix open for the Flaming Lips,
Hmm.
and their drummer was sick, and
Oh, oh wow.
Phoenix played an acoustic set.
Hmm.
Not everybody can adapt on the fly like that, and not and that's just okay. It's the drummer. What if it had been the lead guitarist?
Right.
And, you think of, wow, it's so cool that they were able to mute into this new form and fashion. But
Hmm.
it's been uh it's not something that's so easily replicated. It's so situationally unique.
Hmm.
It's almost hard to contextualize in how in the sense of like just how impactful these events can be
Right.
on
Right.
on mind, body, and spirit.
So success, I found, isn't a linear roadway. Has many turns on it. It's not straight. Um, there are many parallel actions that are happening at the same time, at least in my life, that have brought me to what I now believe to be success. At first, I thought it was fame, fortune, wine, women, and song, that whole thing. Now it's more of a wholesome thing. I feel successful now because I'm able to entertain people either in front of, excuse me, on stage, or as I say in my promo material, behind the scenes. I also feel successful in that I found the love of my life, who left. She ran away. She's tired of hearing me talk. But who we found each other actually through my street performing. That's where she first met me. I don't remember meeting her. She loves to ridicule me about that all the time. And now we both do adventures together. We put together events together, even. She works as a volunteer coordinator, and I help her manage that as much as I can. So, yeah, success, it's not linear. And it doesn't always, the definition of success usually changes by the time you figured out but by the time you've gotten there, if you track it, it's always changing.
To say,
Yeah.
the most we can do is the most we can do, but
Hmm.
that most is ever expanding.
Well, there's that saying, and there's actually a theory, and forgive me, I think it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. information required to know that you're good at a thing is almost exactly the same as the information required to be good at that thing. Therefore, if you're no good at something, you don't have the knowledge to be able to say I'm no good at this.
I'll have to
There
look
you
into
go.
that. I'm not a little bit of philosophical wisdom in there for us. So talk to us about, I mean, I want to hear where you're at today, but we mentioned off camera that, that's been kind of a journey over the last few years. Talk to us a little bit about kind of what's been going on the last couple of years and what's
Okay.
going on today.
Well, so COVID changed a lot for a lot of people. For me, I was primarily a house engineer. So stick to one or two or three house venues, and I didn't really work outside of those venues. During the tail portion of the major pandemic outbreak, I started working for hire as a hired gun, if you will. Uh, Call me up, I'll come out and I'll run sound for you. Wherever you are, we're ready to believe you, what have you. I show up with my Go case and you hand me a PA and I'll get you going and running and sounding good. Um, and that's how I've been operating now, pretty much since. I'm a hired gun these days. I do have a couple of bands that I work with fairly regularly. Tracer Heights out of Kansas City, Missouri. Um, they're a their influences are Grateful Dead and Fish, and they think that I'm one of their. They think that I do a pretty good job with them, despite not only not listening to the Grateful Dead or Fish, but not particularly liking the Grateful Dead.
But you know
Which
what? Here's the thing about music is that to me there are two genres, good and bad.
exactly, and well, I mean, it's all good music if people are enjoying it. I just don't happen to enjoy the Grateful Dead the same way that others do. I'm
That's
not going to
okay.
go. I'm not
That's
going to
why
go out
Baskin
out of my,
Robbins makes 31 flavors. That's why.
exactly. I'm not here to yuck somebody else's yum. I'm not going to come up
Mm.
to you and say, how many deadheads does it take to change a light bulb? None. They don't actually change it. They wait for it to burn out, then follow it around for another 30 years. I'm not going to say that to you because I like you. I'm not going to come up to you and say, what did one deadhead say to the other deadhead when the drugs wore off? God, this music sucks. I'm not going to do that. See, I'm a nice guy.
You
I'm
know
just
how
going to
long?
say,
Well, here, I'll just come back with, how long it takes to drive from Chicago to Kansas City?
yes, I do.
One playing in the band.
Going to Kansas City, here I come. Um, in all seriousness, I do
Yeah.
love working with the Tracer Heights crew.
No,
Um,
absolutely.
they're fantastic, and they're actually forcing me to work outside my envelope. Recently, I've started doing lights for them as well, which is
Oh,
an entirely new version of nerddom. You thought sound engineers were techie and dorky. Light guys are even worse. Oh my goodness. And I'm becoming one. Oh gosh. Anyways, I love working with them. Another band I work with out here. I seem to work with a lot of Grateful Dead bands. I don't know why. I'm good at it. It's
hey, you
one of
know
those
what?
things.
If it works, it works.
Right. So there's a band out here called KC Bones. I'm their second sound guy. If their primary guy is unavailable, they'll call me or he'll call me. I got a call from him a couple of weeks back. Hey Tim, can you come save my butt? What'd you do? I forgot something on the calendar and Casey Bones has a gig. Can you come run Casey Bones? Fine. So I work with Casey Bones fairly regularly, and then Play Dead out of Lawrence. I'm starting to work with them more and more. It's a lot of fun. And then outside of the traditional rock band uh, venue, I work with the Last Carnival Acrobats. They're a circus school in Lawrence.
Okay.
I help deal with their technical issues, and then I'm also the resident loudmouth. So if they need an MC, I come up and say, "Hey, circus, look, have fun." More
To
circus.
talk to someone, love to talk to someone at the school. That sounds amazing.
We'll
That's
see
really
if
cool.
Sika's up for an interview. I'm sure
Ooh,
she would be because they've just passed, I believe it's 10 years
wow.
of being a circus school. Yeah.
Wow.
I'll have to.
It's so important. Yeah, season five foreshadowing, maybe, but
Mm.
stepping outside of your comfort zone and outside of your bounds.
Hmm.
Being being willing to do that. Do you find that that has allowed you to find new ways to express yourself in running
Oh yeah.
sound?
Oh yeah. So stepping both stepping out of my comfort zone and then kind of going back to my roots. The last band I work with fairly regularly is the Kansas City Moonlight Serenade Orchestra. Think Glenn Miller, right?
Mm.
So
Hmm.
Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, Frank
Hmm.
Sinatra's bands, that sort of thing. That's what they play. And so I both go back to my roots as a musician
Real
and I step
wide,
out.
big band sound.
Oh yeah, big
Yeah.
fat big band
Yeah,
sound. And
yeah.
then also I step out of my comfort zone as a sound engineer because with that band, we're not working a regular venue. We're not showing up to a theater. We're showing up to a hangar, a plane hangar, like where planes go and hang out for the night
Yeah.
because they do USO style hangar dances. And so trying to figure out how to get a big band to sound decent and not like, okay, you're rubbing your eyes. You already have a headache. I can see it.
I have a headache just thinking. I'm thinking about Marshall having a headache just listening to this interview and thinking about it,
How
to
the
be
hell does this
honest.
guy manage it?
I'm
I'll
having
tell you,
shadow headaches. I'm having
I'll tell you how I manage it.
sympathy headaches.
It's all about whipping the trumpet players into shape. In all seriousness, it's not actually that. Most of it is dealing with spacing, like the physical placement of the band, and being incredibly careful about what I choose to put through the PA. With that band, I rarely put the horn section in the PA. It's usually just some piano, some bass, and I have a line running for the kick drum only because they do a medley of the armed forces songs.
And you need
Um, you
you
need
need
the
that the boom, boom. You
exactly.
need that thump in there. But so
We're
you
not running
find
a
that.
sub. We're not running a sub, but we still need it because it's helpful. And then of course vocals.
So do you find that running horns, the way that just the unique way that brass works, the sound itself fills the room enough to where it would overwhelm the other instruments if it was mic'd up?
It's not that it would overwhelm, it's that you're doing too much.
Mm.
And you run the risk of muddying everything up. The horns typically, and again, except the trumpet players, but I mean these guys are old, so they're also all deaf. And so reminding and I keep saying the trumpet players because they're the ones whose bells pointed straight out in the audience. And so I have to remind them, guys, chill out. You know, you're in a concrete and steel box. We're not playing for Maynard Ferguson here. You can chill. But in a bigger, in a hangar, miking up the horns is a bad idea because we're already dealing with the one set of one set of airwaves running around. If I put them through the PA, then that's at least two, if not three more. And it could just confuse everything, and it doesn't work.
Understanding that having that brass background really
Hmm.
helps you in that in establishing and maintaining equilibrium.
Hmm.
What have you got coming up? Where can folks find you? Tell us a little bit about any events coming up that you're working on, or
Okay.
where folks can find you.
So
We could talk for hours, but unfortunately,
yeah, but we've got,
we're
but I have to be somewhere for Easter.
uh,
So
at the time of this taping.
by the time of this taping, most of my upcoming gigs have already passed, but I will have been at the Kansas City Juggling Festival. The Kansas City Juggling Club hosts a yearly festival. It's a 3-day event. And actually it's the this in 2024, it's the 18th through the 20th. And on the 18th, we're having a public show, and I'll be performing and emceeing for it. We have a couple of IJA, so International Juggling Association award winners
Hmm.
as our headlining acts, like really stinking good jugglers. Oh my goodness. Friends, if you live in a place that has a juggling club, go check it out. Even if it's just to see the really good jugglers. Because you have that one friend, oh yeah, I can juggle, and it's just an okay 3-ball cascade. Go check out the juggling club, and then maybe learn how to juggle because it's a great form of meditation. I promise. So yeah, that's the Friday night. The Saturday day, I'm actually going to be teaching a workshop on live sound engineering for jugglers. What does a juggler need to know in order to be a halfway decent sound engineer for
Ooh.
themselves?
Ooh, really
Oh
marrying the
yeah.
two together. I love
Hmm.
that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
It was either that or have to go around to every single juggling gig and set up PAs.
Yeah,
I
no,
just
take
didn't
the
want
first
to
one.
do
The
that.
first, no, no, no,
Yeah,
do the
yeah, the
first one. The
first one.
first one. The first one. The first one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then in November of 2024, the Kansas City Moonlight Serenade Orchestra will be in Lawrence at the Dole Institute of Politics performing. And so I'll be there to set up the PA, make sure everybody can hear my band leaders say, and now here's our singers, that sort of thing. And then after that, I don't really have a whole lot booked until spring of 2025. Memorial Day weekend 2025, the Lawrence Busker Festival will return, bringing street performers from all around the world. Oh, yeah. That is so much fun. So mark that in your calendars. And hey, free balloons for the kids. Um,
Free balloons, folks. Free balloons. Well, I mean, Tim, I think it's really cool that, incorporated on, I mean, on top of everything that you do, incorporating education and bringing it to the masses is so, so important. And it's one of the things that we really love to highlight on this show. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
well, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute blast. This has been the highlight of my week, and it's only Tuesday, which could mean it's either going to get better or worse. Time will tell.
Time will indeed tell. Hey, comment down below and let us know. This is Steiner with another episode of Secondhand Talent. We'll see you next Wednesday. And that's a podcast.
Oh my goodness. Is that a podcast?
That's a podcast. That's it. We're done.